Hello and welcome to Sound Financial Group. My name is Paul Adams. I'm the founder and CEO of Sound Financial Group, and I was joined by Corey earlier today in laying out this episode, but unfortunately we were defeated by our remote recording technology, so he won't be with us today, but he would like to wish you a happy belated Thanksgiving, as would I. And I hope both of you listening to the show, that all of you out there enjoy this episode today, where we're going to talk about with safe withdrawal rates in retirement and the misinformation that's out there. We're going to be talking a little bit of an article that came out recently in the Wall Street Journal, and then we're going to kind of contrast and compare the sage advice of the 4% distribution rate to the Dave Ramsey Good Growth Mutual Fund takeout way more than your money can last strategy. So with that, let me share with you this article from our good friends over at the Wall Street Journal. They talk about the fact that retirement is back and the 4% distribution rate is back. Now, the 4% distribution rate, as those of you who've been listening to the show for a while have seen, is this idea that you can only take out 4% a year from your investments in order to have your capital base, your capital at work, last a sufficient amount of time in your old age such that you can continue to take income for the rest of your life. Well, what you can see here, the Wall Street Journal is mentioning that it's back up to 4%. And it even says 2 years ago, Morningstar recommended starting with 3.3% distributions. And now, 2 years later, it's 4%. In reality, if you were taking 4, you probably would have been fine even before they lowered it to 3.3, because they're adjusting it intra-year based upon market conditions. But if you have a strategy that is intended to work all the time, you shouldn't have to massively change your retirement distributions because of 1 or 2 years. Now, for those of you listening, we're going to recommend you go to our episode on the volatility buffer, which you can see as number 239, income investing in retirement. We'll make sure that Miranda puts that down in the show notes. But what they talk about is the reason the 4% rule works is because our portfolio investments can go down. And when they do go down, we don't want to take out more money while the market is down. Now, the other thing that's a bit of a problem, I think, in the way they're illustrating this is they are showing it as a method with 40% in stocks and 60% in bonds. Now, I think this is one of the most poor decisions somebody could make, and it has been a poor decision for a long time. This is not new. You see, when they say, hey, you should get way more conservative at retirement, the problem is, all of the old days when they used to do that assumed that the average age person might retire at 65, but the average death was age 63. So that's fine if I'm only going to live 4 or 5 years in retirement and I lived age 69, 70, well, then maybe I want to be really conservative. But in reality, if you're retiring for a 20 or 30 year period of time, you need to have enough equities in your portfolio that you are able to significantly outpace inflation. So they even say in here that it's a good idea and you could take as much as 5.4% if you only need 20 years of retirement income. How would you know? How would you know you just needed 20 years of retirement income? Because at age 55, you're like, you know what? I think by 75, I'll be toast. Or at 65, you're like, for sure, I'll be dead at age 85. So if I see my money dwindling out at age 80, I'm going to feel perfectly fine about that. Of course, you wouldn't feel perfectly fine about that. Retirees can spend more than 4% if they're willing to be flexible, like running out of money flexible. Of course, you don't want to do that. And my favorite recommendation in this article, again, this is a good article in that it's expressing to people you should take 4%. But at the same time, they're recommending overly conservative portfolios that are going to be eroded by inflation over time. And the final recommendation in this article is other retirement income strategies is to have a 30-year ladder of varying maturities of treasuries that are the inflation-protected securities. Just do those And the downside is, this is the last line of the article, the downside is that the retiree would deplete the tips ladder by the end of year 30. Did you try again? So that'd be a terrible idea to put yourself in the position that you are going to run out of money on an almost certain basis by buying inflation-protected securities. Like, yeah, you're not going to have a lot of volatility. And the reason you won't have a lot of volatility is your money is going to slowly get depleted every single year out for 30 years. And let's just think to ourselves, what does it feel like to be healthy, relatively young, and be nearly running out of money? Now, what we want that would be success is, does our money give us the income that we want for the rest of our years and leave behind whatever is important to us to leave behind? What this article leaves out is, not only does it throw out some portfolio structures that are obviously suboptimal, like 40% in stocks and 60% in bonds. Not only is that obviously suboptimal, but then they go as far as to recommend that you could just put it all in inflation-protected securities. So I'm having all kinds of problems with my Apple Watch talking to me, so I'm having a fuss with it here, guys. Sorry. If you hear Siri talking in the background, that's not me intending to do that, but I probably just triggered it again. I think we're good now. All right, so let's see what some other financial pundits have to say about this 4% distribution rate. Well, Dave Ramsey has something to say. So let's jump in and see what he's saying.
I'm 72 years old and my wife is 70. We're both in good health. We have a combined retirement and Social Security income of about $140,000 a year. We own our home outright and have no debt. We have about $100,000 in Roth and $1 million in traditional IRAs. Our
Way to go, Steve.
Our wonderful financial advisor is recommending a distribution of no more than 4%. We're looking at about 5% to enable us to travel while we're able to. What is your recommendation on the maximum annual distribution? It's a great question. And they're in a good spot. And so this makes me feel better about saying, sure, $40,000 versus $50,000 on the distribution is what they're really asking, right? On, let's say, the $1 million in traditional IRAs, that's going to be taxable. Mm-hmm. This doesn't feel like a big portion of their world if they've got, the $140,000 income.
So if the money is invested in good mutual funds and it's making, average market returns of 11%, 12%.
All right, did you guys hear that? The average market returns of 11 or 12%. Now, here's the thing. He's saying average market returns of 10 or 12%. Let me show you guys something. This is a mutual fund and ETF screener. You can access this on your own. It looks like it's mutualfunds.com. I've included all ETFs, all mutual funds, active, passive, individual, and advisor-based mutual funds. And you can see here, I couldn't get like a 20-year history, anything like, I couldn't get any of the screeners to give me that. Even our own Morningstar license seemed to only give me 10 or 15-year time horizons and not able to boil it down like I'd like. So this gives you something you could reference on your own. And what you can see is there's about 30 per page. Now, out of the, 40-some thousand mutual funds that exist, there are about 3 pages of mutual funds that even had a 10-year return above 12. So let's just, and by the way, he's only recently dropping it to 11 or 12%. So let me show you guys this mutual fund screener here. I didn't have my screen showing to you. So this is what it looks like. I'm on the second page now, or third page now. And you can see 12%, 12%, 12%. So about 25 funds out of the entire universe of available mutual funds even have a 10-year history of 12% or above. That's it. So what's that? Like 70, 80 mutual funds maybe that have over a 10-year above 12% average. Now, that average also may not be the average you think. If you look at some of our other episodes, you'll see an up year and a down year don't exactly equal out. And most of the time, what they're using here is the arithmetic average. But it does say they're using the 10-year total compound growth. So that might be accurate. But the bottom line is, Dave Ramsey, there weren't that many. Number two, out of the 40-some thousand mutual funds you might be able to buy into, how would you have known which one of these were the one that was going to do over 12 at the beginning? You see, he never gives you that information. So he's saying good growth mutual fund, 11, 12%. Let's pick up where he left off.
Why can you only take out 4%?
Just fear, I think, is the main reason people do it.
Why would the
Inflation.
financial advisor say that?
He gets more money? Is that how that works?
Possibly.
So let's pause there. So not only does he say 11, 12%, giving no grounding for it, but then he says the reason the advisor might say the difference between 4 and 5% is because of the advisor's interest. You see, this is the problem. Not only does he not offer factual information, but he also obfuscates it by simply incriminating the person that would say something different than him. This is a really important fallacy to understand, is that if you bring something up to somebody like a fact or recommendation, and their way of answering it isn't to give you counterfactual information that would allow you to have more data and make the decision yourself, instead they throw out an opinion and then incriminate the person that offered the other assessment, which is exactly what Dave did here.
Or possibly he is a financial planning lemming. You know what a lemming is?
That's an old school word.
These are small rats that run in herds and follow each other over cliffs.
That is the funniest way I've heard to describe financial advisors.
And so, meaning you go along with the crowd. You go along with the crowd. You go along with the crowd. And you don't even ask why. You just go along with the crowd.
Now, by the way, to Dave Ramsey, it would be okay to go along with the crowd as long as you're with his crowd. You see, he's fine if you do what he says without understanding it. But if you do something else that maybe is based upon a ton of evidence and a lot of math and overwhelming support by economists in that you have to have a distribution rate that's significantly less than your rate of return, such that you don't accelerate the erosion of your capital during the down years, doing that and thinking for yourself makes you a lemming.
And so you don't want to be sheeple. So here's the thing. That is a standard thing in financial planning, 4%. Because after inflation and after poor rates of return on the portfolio, you're still going to be okay at 4%. But by God, 5%, you're going to sink it. You know, which is completely asinine. This is ridiculous.
They're going ultra conservative
obviously,
here.
Steve, you are smarter than your financial advisor because you have more money than he does. And you've done a better job than he has. So you can kind of tell him what to do with your money. Be real comfortable doing that. And dude, if you want to pull out 6%, it's okay with me. I think you're going to be okay. If you want to pull out 10%, you're not going to destroy the portfolio because, dude, I mean, you're 70.
If you want to take out 10%, he says, you're not going to destroy the portfolio. So to test this, let me show you what I did. I set up a retirement scenario in our software for Dave Ramsey. And I gave the client $1 million 401k and no Social Security income, no nothing else. We have a nice, clean representation of this 401k and somebody taking a distribution. Now, the first distribution I'm taking, and then it inflation adjusts, in this case at 2.5% going forward, of 4%. That's $3,333 a month. Now, what this system is doing is something called a Monte Carlo scenario. What a Monte Carlo scenario does is the Monte Carlo scenario takes like a big bingo ball. And in the bingo ball are all of the various returns that you might want to have the returns and their likelihood in there. So there aren't very many of the super high years or super low years. And there's a lot more of those middle years, if you can kind of picture that on a bell curve. So the ball gets turned. One ball is taken out of the tumbler. They look at it. They say, that's this year's return. And they put it back and it turns again and they pull it out and that's the next year return. They do that for the entire span of the client's life. And then they redo it 3,000 times to come up with a percentage likelihood that your level of distribution would be able to be maintained by your portfolio for the rest of your life. If you guys look here, you can kind of get a sense of the amplitude or the differential of potential returns. And I added this person at age 65. I know Dave's person is in their mid 70s, but we just made the Dave Ramsey sample client this very, very simple, span of potential outcomes. And the probability of retiring, if you take out that 4% distribution, even adjusting for inflation, shutting your eyes, hoping for the best for all of retirement, you have a 96% likelihood of success. But now, he just said, kind of at the top of his lungs, you could take out 10% and you're not going to ruin the portfolio. So that would be 8,333. Now, when I hit refresh on this, what it's going to do is the proposed plan is going to adjust to the new likelihood of this 10% distribution. Again, I gave this the greatest amount of Dave Ramsey philosophy, which is I gave him the all million and I put this in 100% stock portfolio, emulating some of the good growth mutual funds that he might refer people to. So now we're taking out $100,000 a year from our $1 million portfolio. Well, yeah, you're not going to destroy the portfolio in 13% of the cases, but the entire rest of the cases, you are going to absolutely crater your investments and one day be in a position. In fact, the median outcome is you'd be out of money by age 78 because you're taking 10% out in the up years and the down years. And when you take money out in the down years, you accelerate the erosion of your capital, destroying the ability of your portfolio to be able to rebound and give you the income you want for the rest of your life. Okay, Dave, what else do you have to say?
Well, you're going to live to 170? You're not going to wind this thing down in 25 years. You're not going to tear the principal up in 25 years even doing that.
Okay, you're not going to tear the principal up even doing that, referring to the 10% distribution. Beg to differ. According to this, we might have the portfolio totally blown up in a matter of 7 years if the market doesn't cooperate. Midterm, like the median outcomes, are that the money could be gone by 78. Dave, like this high distribution rate is really, really bad. And the client, you're saying, is smarter than the advisor. And I make no judgment based upon that, except to say the advisor is giving good advice. Now, I will give, is that big of a difference between the 4 and 5% distribution? No, you could probably do 5 if you don't take as much for inflation in future years, and you could model that out. But he's saying you could take 10. And there couldn't be anything further from the truth that you could consistently sustain a 10% distribution rate.
You can be in a position to enjoy your life. And so I would suggest 5, maybe 6% drawdown on this if you've got it invested in good mutual funds that are giving you market rates of return. And I also would suggest that your wonderful, that's what he called him, right?
Wonderful. Yeah, those were not my words.
Now, right before he does more to besmirch this advisor's advice, who's actually doing a pretty good job, why don't we just check our little math here and let's just make it the 6% distribution rate instead of 4. So that'd be 60,000 a year. That's going to be 5,000 a month. Let's just test Dave's advice and what happens to our probability. It's still down to 72%. There is some likelihood in the mid-range or low mid-range you could run out of money. It's a real problem. To just casually say, I'd just do 6 could be a huge issue and could put you in a position that you would run out of money.
Wonderful financial advisor. Have a good explanation for why he's giving you these numbers. If you're getting an 11 or a 12% rate of return, why are you suggesting that 5% is going to destroy my life when 4% does not?
See, that's just it. Nobody said this advisor said 5% distributions would destroy their life. They said 4% distribution is the highest likelihood of being able to have your portfolio last as long as possible. At least I would bet you he didn't say it's going to destroy your life.
1% is not life-changing either way.
Well, it's not logical. There's nothing. It's only based in, that's a standard card you pull
industry standard,
out of the file in the industry.
So he's saying it's just a standard card you pull if you're in the industry. Except we just gave you all the math to back that up. And by the way, I'm not the only one. you can see on the right-hand side of this YouTube video, there are other people who are just showing the math and being like, Dave is hurting people, talking about an unrestrained withdrawal rate with no grounding behind it whatsoever.
I am curious, Dave, would you say what's strategically the best route to go, using the Roth portion first versus traditional in retirement?
The traditional's got a mandatory
distribution
anyway. At 70 and a half that he's going to have to begin. And so I'm going to start there and at least do the mandatory. The Roth is tax-free and will pass tax-free. I'm probably going to use the traditional. I'm probably going to go ahead and pay the taxes on it and pull out enough to pay the taxes on it before I touch the Roth.
Now, I would go with Dave on this, by the way. Like, just if I had a choice, if it was me, I would spend my IRA before I'd spend the Roth. And yet, I think for a client recommendation, you have to know a lot more about them, their family, what kind of legacy they want to leave. But I mean, all in all, that's not bad.
Let the Roth continue to grow tax-free because it will pass to your heirs tax-free as well. So that's the good news on that account.
Good deal.
So good question.
So good question, they say. But here's what it comes down to, y'all. We have to be in a position, we hear a pundit say something, that we have a coach or an advisor that will sit and do the math with us. Like, Dave Ramsey isn't bad in and of himself. There are plenty of actual financial advisors out there that kind of roll like he does. Like, they just sort of condescend to you a little bit. They act like they know more than you, and they don't take the time to increase your understanding and knowledge on the topic. They instead work to have you accept them as the authority and you're just to do what they say. If anybody's doing that and not putting you in a position to better understand it, of course, you should always make your own decision. We even tell our clients it's like we're the navigator of the ship and you're the captain. The navigator's job is to give you a sense of what the journey is going to be like and what might be the best path to arrive at the destination that you want to be at. And what are the challenges going to be on the way there? And how do we protect ourselves from those challenges? That's an advisor's role. An advisor should not be telling you what to do, and certainly shouldn't put you in a position that you would feel like you couldn't ask them the question or able to do the math. And if you notice that advisor condescends down to you, like, that's a good indicator that may be somebody that you don't want to listen to about your money, at least not without double checking the math. And in this case, Dave Ramsey is bringing up some things that we could show again and again and again, just like I did in our Monte Carlo scenario. We're able to demonstrate that his distribution rate would not work. His distribution rate would absolutely run somebody out of money. And that increasing the distribution rate does increase the risk. Now, that's okay if you want to increase that risk. The problem is Dave Ramsey is not communicating to his listeners how big the risk is of them just casually saying, I'll take 6 or 8 or 10, and you're smarter than your advisor. You might be. You might be smarter than your advisor. But that advisor is actually giving you sound and prudent advice with the 4% distribution. And that's why, for most of you listening, Dave Ramsey doesn't have the answers, because if you're listening to the show, you probably aren't going to retire on 100,000. You're probably going to need to retire on 300,000 or 400,000. And if you need to retire on 300,000 or 400,000, the distribution rates aren't as meaningful, because you can go from a $350,000 income to a $280,000 income and still pay your bills. It's a lot harder to go from a $80,000 income down to 50 and still pay your bills. So with that, be sure that whether you're listening to the Wall Street Journal or you're listening to Dave Ramsey about something as important as the distribution rate you'd take for the rest of your life, just have whoever you're working with run different scenarios for you and see the likelihood of running out of money for yourself. Don't believe Dave. Don't blindly believe your advisor. Help them help you to better understand the financial philosophy you're working with, and then you'll make better decisions about your money going forward. And if you feel like you're not getting that, call us. You can always reach out to us at info@sfgwa.com. Of course, there's links to LinkedIn and other videos and all that good stuff here in the podcast. I would ask you guys, take the time to subscribe, take the time to like this video, because if you don't, other people are going to see this Dave Ramsey content and they will end up taking too much money out of their portfolio. The poor guy whose email was lucky enough to get selected for the show may well be driven down the primrose path to running out of money because he feels like he's doing 100% the right thing because Dave gave him a blessing to take distribution rates up to 10%. And we don't want that to happen to anybody. We hope that what this does, you liking and subscribing to this video, put a comment below. Say you disagree with me. The algorithm loves the comments, loves the likes, and is more likely to get this in front of more people and help them too. And as always, we hope that this episode has been a contribution to you being able to design and build a good life.